Hi Rangers, today we're going to learn about solving equations focusing on 1 and 2 step. So we have some steps to help us out. Okay, the steps are really going to come in handy when we get into multi-step, but we're going to go ahead and make sure that we know them now. So step 1, we want to distribute. Okay, in my last video we learned about the distributive property. Step 2, we want to combine like terms. We also learned about this in my last video. Okay, 3, we want to add or subtract. The constant. And again, in the last video, we learned that a constant is a number without a variable. And number 4, we want to multiply or divide by the coefficient. And again, in the last video, we learned what a coefficient was. It's the number in front of the variable. So we're going to start off with some one-step equations. So look at example 1a. Okay, so in 1a, we have x plus 2 equals 3. So we're going to start off by always drawing a line through the equal sign. So we're going to write that step, step 1. Draw a line through the equal sign. Okay. Step 2, we're going to subtract 2 on both sides. So step 2, minus 2 on both sides. So when we do that, we get 2 minus 2, which happens to 0 out. And I'm left with x, so I drop down my variable. And then I get 3 minus 2, and I get 1. So my answer would be x equals 1, and that would be our final step. Okay, moving on to 1b. Now, this one often throws people off because the variable is on the other side, but it's the same process. So 1, we're going to draw a line through the equal sign. Okay, step 2. We need to move over the constant. So to move over the constant, we do the opposite. Well, the opposite of a negative 5 is plus 5. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And last but not least, we simplify. So on this left side, we have 7 plus 5, we get 12. On the right side, we have negative 5 plus 5, that is 0. And then I drop down my x term. So I get x equals 12. Oops. So step 3, x equals 12, or 12 equals x, it's the same thing. Okay. Moving on to example 2, we want to solve 3x equals negative 15. So our first step is going to stay the same. Draw a line through the equal sign. Okay. Now, this time, I don't have a constant to add or subtract over. So now I have a coefficient, which is a number in front of the x. So I am going to either multiply or divide by the coefficient. So in this case, I'm multiplying 3 times x, so I'm going to do the opposite by dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Okay, so 2, divide by 3 on both sides. So we often show dividing by the fraction line. Now that we have done that, I can simplify. So 3x divided by 3 is just x. Negative 15 divided by 3 is a negative 5. So step 3, x equals negative 5. Okay. Looking at part B, we have a divided by 4 equals 16. So our first step is to draw a line through the equal sign. Okay, step 2, I realize that I'm dividing by 4. Opposite of division is multiplication, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. Okay, so now that I have done that, when I multiply by 4, I'm left with a equals 6 times 4, which is 24. So step 3, my a equals 24. Okay, so those are showing you one step. If you have any questions, go ahead and write those over here. That way you know to ask your teacher for clarification. Okay, now I have some examples of two-step equations. Okay, so solving two-step equations, same thing. We're just going to combine example 1 and example 2 together. So here we go. We're going to write our steps off to the side as well, like we were doing. We just now have space for them. So example number 3, first thing we're going to do, draw a line through the equal sign. Okay. Step 2, we want to move the constant. In this case, my constant is negative 6. We're going to do the opposite by making it plus 6 on both sides. So when I do that, I get 3n, negative 6 plus 6 zeroes out, and 15 plus 6 is 21. From here, I'm going to divide by my coefficient because the 3n are being multiplied. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Oh, and I forgot to write my steps. So we plus 6 on both sides. Then we divide by 3 on both sides. Okay, now that I'm caught up with my steps, we can keep going. So when I divide, 3n divided by 3 is just n. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So my answer, n equals 7. Now, we can always check our work to make sure that we're doing this correctly. So this is how we check our work. We have 3, and we're going to plug in 7 for n, minus 6, and we want to see if it equals 15. Well, 7 times 3 is 21, minus 6. Again, we still don't know if it equals 15. Well, 21 minus 6 is 15, so 15 equals 15, so it checks out. Okay, so this is how we check our work. Now, example number 4. We have 9d plus 10 equals negative 17. So, step 1, draw a line through the equal sign. Step 2, we want to move over the constant. In this case, my constant is 10. It's a positive 10, so the opposite of a positive 10 is minus 10. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So when I do that, I get 9d. 10 minus 10 zeroes out. And negative 17 minus 10 is a negative 27. From here, I want to divide by my coefficient. So I'm going to divide both sides by 9. When I divide by 9 on both sides, 9d divided by 9 is just d. Negative 27 divided by 9 is a negative 3. So d equals negative 3. Okay, moving on to example 5. This one might be a little tricky for us, so it's always nice to practice it. So step 1, divide or line through the equal sign. Okay, so we always want to start by moving our constant. My constant is 6, so I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, so minus 6 minus 6. So when I do that, I'm left with negative d, the 6's cancel out, equals 2. Okay, now we need to understand that that negative is a negative 1d in front. So I need to divide by the coefficient of negative 1. Okay, so negative 1d divided by negative 1 is just d. And 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2. So d equals negative 2. Looking at example 6, we're switching it up a little bit to make it fun. So again, step 1, draw a line through the equal sign. And I know that the steps seem repetitive, but I promise when you look back at your notes, they're going to be there to help you. Okay, so we're going to start by moving our constant. So that's the negative 5. Opposite of negative 5 is plus 5 plus 5. So we added 5 to both sides. So we get x over 3 is equal to 17. Now I'm dividing x by 3, so opposite of division is multiplication, so we're going to multiply both sides by 3. So when I do that, I'm left with x. And 17 times 3 is 51. So x equals 51. Okay, looking at number 7, we have d divided by 9 plus 11 equals 25. Go ahead and pause the video, see if you can do this on your own. So hopefully you attempted it on your own. Let's see how you did. So we start by drawing a line through the equal sign. Okay, then we need to move our constant, so we subtract 11 from both sides. So when we do that, 11 minus 11, we're left with d divided by 9 equals 25 minus 11 is 14. From here, we need to multiply by what's in the denominator, so multiply both sides by 9. Okay, so when we do that, we're left with d equals 14 times 9, which is 126. Perfect. Now we have one word problem that we're going to solve. So, example 8. Lane wants to save $900 to go to Puerto Rico. She saves $45 each week and now has $180. How many more weeks, W, will it take her to save $900? Solve 180 plus 45W equals 900. Okay, so it already gave us the equation, but eventually we're going to have to be able to come up with that equation ourselves. So, step 1. Yes, you guessed it. Draw a line through the equal sign. Okay, now looking at it, we need to move over the constant. The constant is a positive 180, so we're going to subtract 180 from both sides. Okay, so when we do that, those zero out, we're left with 45W equals 900 minus 180, which is 720. From here, we need to get that W by itself, so we're going to divide by the coefficient of 45. So when I divide both sides by 45, I get W equals 720 divided by 45, which is 16. Now, what does this answer actually mean? Well, it means that in 16 weeks, Lane will have a total of $900, so she can go to Puerto Rico. Okay, so you have some examples to try on your own, and don't forget to write your 2 to 3 sentence summary over what you learned, and any questions over here on this left side right there, and make sure you ask your teacher if you have